creating an ident. Okay, so in today's lesson, you're going to look at creating a very simple ident for Spectrum, which was the logo that you produced before. So this is an example of what you're going to work towards.
Up next on Spectrum, we have an exciting new guide on using a Sony camera.
So very, very simple, very straightforward, made up of just a handful of elements. The first part that we're going to look at is basically using the layers that you should be familiar with in Photoshop to create a very simple series of transitions from one image to another and then to the logo. And then what we're going to do is we're going to export that, take it into Final Cut where we will add some effects. As you can see, we have added an effect on the Spectrum ident, and we will add some audio to just bring it all together. So the first thing you want to do is go into Photoshop. Here's an example of what we'll be doing. But you want to create a new project. You want to select from the preset Film and Video, and you want to select HDTV 1080p, P for progressive, and 29.97, so roughly sort of 30 frames per second. This is the kind of standard setup for UK television graphics. So if we press OK, we can get rid of the timeline at the moment. So it should come up with this image here, and you'll have these guides. So you want to try and keep everything kind of within those guides, because you don't really want anything too close to those borders in case it's cropped on a widescreen. So basically, just create a new layer, File, Place, and we're going to add the vector graphics. So in the desktop, within your Documents folder, I've just put all the images we're going to be using. So the first one was a camera, I think, and we'll just scale this, place it in sort of center of the frame. Okay. Yes, we want to place that because we're happy with that. We'll create a new layer, File, Place. We'll select the second image, Music Note, and we'll just put this on the top. Now, we'll be able to change this later. They're not going to overlap, so it doesn't matter that you're putting one layer on top. Now, the reason we're going to do this is so we can kind of line everything up in the same place. So, yeah, we want to place, create a new layer, File, Place. We'll take the phone next. It's a very small image that I'll need to crop actually. It's a piece of stock art. So I'm just going to place that in a minute. Just let me crop that quickly. And then I'll get rid of that previous layer. So we've just got the phone. I'm just going to line that up just a little bit. That's a bit better. Another new layer, and the last one, second last one, File, Place, and we'll just put the book art, which is massive, so we'll need to shrink that. Just hold Shift when you're changing the image properties so that it doesn't stretch the image. So we will place that, and then last but not least, we will place the Spectrum logo. Just make sure that's in the center. Place. So basically we've got a bunch of layers that we can now animate, should we wish to, using the timeline feature in Photoshop, which pretty much turns Photoshop into a video editing package. So the way to do that is to go Window, Timeline, and then Create Video Timeline. And you can see that it's created all the layers as almost like video files. So the Spectrum logo is going to be the last thing that we see. And before that, we're going to see the book vector. And then we're going to see the phone. We'll get the durations a bit more precise in a moment. I just want to show you how this works. And then if we take this last layer. So if I play from about here, you'll get a sense of what it's going to look like. So we'll just get these timings a little more precise. So we'll bring this one in. And you want to try and keep these individual layers around about the same size. And then if we drag that out a little longer, we actually want that to be the longest so that we've got some frames for a voiceover to go over. So there we have it. So that is pretty much a very simple way of kind of just using layers to create you know, a change from one image to another. Now you can actually do a little bit more with these. If you click on the little arrow next to the name of the layer, so in this case the camera vector, which is the one we can see on the window, and you see transform, opacity, and style. Now transform is like the scale and stuff, and this little logo means we can add, we can basically change the properties of the image. We can add what's called keyframes, so we can do like a very simple animation. So if I was to change the size of that, and you can see it's added this little diamond. Now that is basically a keyframe. So if we then play this back, it should shrink. It will basically take the first keyframe, then the size of the image, and the last keyframe, the size I've changed it to, and it will fill in the blanks. So you can see that's now shrunk. But of course we don't want to, on this, for this example, we're just going to keep it really simple. But for those of you that want to experiment a little bit and play around with Photoshop and get to know it a bit more, I suggest you try out some of the options on the keyframes by clicking on the little arrow. And you can maybe do some cool stuff with changing the size or changing the opacity, so how much we can see an image, or changing the layer style. So there's some quite cool stuff you can do. So I'm just going to go back to where we were originally. Now to export it, there's a little arrow on the bottom left of this timeline window. If we click on that, it'll say Spectrum Ident MP4, that's what we want to do. We want to, that's the previous one that I used, we're going to render over that. So you won't see that warning. Problem with the media encoder, so let's try that again. Sorry, if we click on here, and we'll call it Spectrum Ident 2. And there we go, progress, exporting video. So that should have exported. So we want to basically, and you can see it in this little folder here, Spectrum Ident 2. We want to go into Final Cut, and we're going to add some audio and some music and a little voiceover to our video project. So if you double click on the clapperboard as you have before, and we'll go File, New Project, and we'll call it Spectrum Ident New, because I've already got an existing one. File, New Event, and we'll name that Spectrum. And then we want to click Import Media, and we want to import the video file that we've just created. And then we're going to drag the whole thing down onto the timeline. Command plus will allow us to zoom in, and we can edit this more precisely. We want to add some music, and we're going to add a little effect as well. So we want to split off where the ident appears. So if you click on B, or you can click here, you can see the shortcuts are all here. We're going to select the blade tool. So if you move this little line, which is referred to as the timeline indicator, to where we want to cut our video track, and we want to do it just there, just at the beginning. And you can use the arrow keys to be more precise. So just forward and back, or right and left. And we'll click on that line on the blade tool, and it cuts it for us. So now we want to just cut off a little bit of this that we're going to add our effect to. And the effect, if you click on the right hand side where we get all our transitions and effects and textiles and music, click on that little logo here. And you'll see we've got all, I'm going to find an effect called chromic aberration, if I can. which is here, and just drag it over the top, and then we can see it does a little shaky thing. And then where we've cut it here, it then goes back to normal. Now you'll see why I've done that when we add some music in a moment. So we want to click on this little musical note, and we want to find, I think it's an I life, we want to find synth zap accent, zip zap zap accent. I think it's this one. It's not that one, but we're going to use that. It is that one, sorry. We're going to use that here. Just going to bring that in a little earlier. I'm just going to cut that a little bit shorter. And we're going to also use electronic hit. 03 is the one we're looking for. So there we go. And we're going to use that to, we're going to slide that into where the image changes. So it'll change from the camera to the musical note. So just there. And then if we click on that, press Command C to copy, we can then just paste that in using Command and V. So if we move along, so Command V, just there, and then if we move along to the last one, where it changes to the magazine, or the book, should I say, Command V. Just play this back to have a look. And then we want to add some music over the top, and we're going to use a track called Progressive House. Now, the beginning of this track I don't really want to use. So I'm going to cut off the top of this track. You can use any music that you feel is suitable, or you can, if you're struggling to make a decision, just use Progressive House. Okay, and then we're going to record our voiceover. So if you go to Window, Record Audio, 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, just do a quick sound check. Up next on Spectrum, we have an exciting new guide on using a Sony camera. And then stop the record, and then we should have our voiceover. Switch the. Up next on. Just turn that down slightly. Up next on Spectrum, we have an exciting new guide on using a Sony camera. Okay, we're just going to make that clip a little longer just by copying it. So Command C, Command V again. And I'm just going to trim the head off this clip. And let's have a view back. Up next on Spectrum, we have an exciting new guide on using a Sony camera. The last thing we're going to do is export the project. So if you go to File, Share, and then we're just going to choose Apple Devices 1080p, so that'll work with the computer that we're using. And we've got Spectrum New, Ident New, and then we'll select Next. It will allow us to save it in a folder. I'll click Save. You'll see this dial will start on 0%, and then that will move to 100. And once that's complete, once that gets to 100, it means that our ident has been exported. So you just have to be patient at this point. Okay, so now the render is at 100%. We should be able to go into our project folder, and we can see here we have Spectrum Ident New M4V. If we double click on that, this is the one that we have created. So up next on Spectrum, we have an exciting new guide on using a Sony camera. So a little bit shorter than 15 seconds, which is what you're being asked to produce. But the idea is that this is just an introduction to how you can animate in Photoshop, and this is an introduction to how you can combine that with using some of the effects in Final Cut as well. So the idea is that you've got to use the tools that you think are appropriate for what you want to create. And you also need to think about conducting some tests or experiments of what you hope to achieve from your finished product. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid of getting things wrong, because this is a learning process and this is why you're on this course. So you have to basically get used to using the tools at your disposal so that you can select the appropriate tool for the job. So hopefully this tutorial has kind of opened your eyes to some of the other functions that are available both in Photoshop and in Final Cut Pro. And I wish you all the best with developing your ideas for your own ident.